Today on John's Briefs, we're here again with Terry Johnson from Firearms Legal Protection. And I want to talk about something that I think we don't really like to talk about as self-defenders, that we think in our mind that our defensive use of force will be clean, it will be awesome, it will come out perfect, we'll be hailed in the paper as the victor. But the reality is that sometimes good people get charged anyways, depending especially on the jurisdiction. And so what I want to talk about with Terry today is particularly when to take a plea bargain versus when to fight it. Today's video is brought to us by the generosity of Firearms Legal Protection. Firearms Legal Protection is a legal defense program for lawful gun owners. You win the fight, and they will help you win the fight after the fight for the rest of your life. There's a link in the description for a coupon code for a discount for all active self-protection watchers. Terry, again, I really appreciate you coming on John's Briefs and giving us this information.
Thank you. We're glad to be here, glad to be partnered with Active Self-Protection, and looking forward to continuing to bring great knowledge and, protection and great self-defense techniques to everybody out there.
And I haven't said this in a bit, that they are pretty low-key about how they help folks. But what I want you to know is that Firearms Legal Protection is one of just a couple of companies, and the one that we've chosen to partner with, that if you're in a defensive use of force, will help you and be your legal representation. They have attorneys in every state, and in every state that they offer coverage, that are the best. And I've gotten to know several of them here in Arizona, and they really are the very best. And that's the same way in every state. And they bring those folks to your defense, and they pay the bill. That's up front. That's pretty great peace of mind. I really think that's, and for not much money. And there is a link in the description to a discount for active self-protection subscribers. So let's talk about this idea. Let's just say I had a defensive use of force, but the prosecutor is a jerk, which does happen.
No,
yeah,
prosecutors.
No, I mean never,
No,
right?
never.
Never.
Okay.
It's always the defense attorneys that are scumbags, never the prosecutors, right? So let's just say we get an overzealous prosecuting attorney because that's an elected position, and they got to be tough on crime, and so you get all these charges, and now you as the attorney start going to work with that prosecutor and batting back and forth about what the reality of the stuff is here. Can you talk us through that a little?
Sure. What generally happens is there is a gap between your reality and the reality of what a court system actually does.
Okay.
So, for example, it's kind of like watching ER, thinking you know everything that happens in an operating room. That's not the case. You have doctors, you have nurses, you have anesthesiologists. All of those people know what's going on. Same thing in the court, okay? It is a system. And it is a system.
You mean it's not like Perry Mason?
Not like Perry Mason.
But I've watched CSI and Law and Order.
Well, listen, here's a thing that's rather interesting. A lot of people don't understand. I'll give you a statistic out of Michigan out of 2017. There were 57,003 felony cases. Okay?
And 3.
57,003. How many of those do you believe went to trial? And give me a percentage. And we haven't done this, and this.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we haven't primed this.
So here's the thing: whether jury trial or bench trial, which is where the judge decides, what percentage of those do you believe? I'll give you 2 guesses. Actually went to trial.
All right, so I'm going to take a guess. John took a guess. John said 10%. You guessed 10% went to trial. I'm going to guess 2%.
You are a little high, 1.6%.
Oh, I was close, 1.6%. So almost all of these end either in dismissal or plea.
Well, not dismissal. They end up in either going to trial or
1.6%.
1.6%, or the other comes down to a situation where, guess what? Someone's had to take a plea. Why? That's how the system is set up. Some counties plea you dead on the nose. Charge you dead on the nose. What do I mean by that? This is the charge. This is what we're going to charge you with. We're not budging because we know we can make our case.
Plead guilty, or we will just send you through the system and get a guilty verdict.
Exactly. Other places, they'll charge you high in the anticipation you're going to negotiate it down. Okay?
It's like buying a car, for God's sake.
Well, yeah, and it's really, you're gambling with your life. Okay? So in your head, even though, let's say, I didn't do anything, I felt I was justified, you may have been. However, the question that I ask people is, what are you willing to gamble on that?
Right.
I'll tell you an interesting story. I had a gentleman that I represented in Lansing, Michigan. He was 20 years old. He was accused of shooting into a apartment building, which he didn't do. And he had a 2-year-old daughter, and we had to have a painful conversation. That conversation really came down to, here's what the prosecutor is offering. If you take this deal, you can watch your, it was 15 years plus the enhanced of 2 for the gun. So
It's that weird Michigan statute of the escalator for the firearm.
correct.
Mandatory 2 years.
Mandatory 2 years to do first.
Yeah.
Consecutive.
Consecutive.
Yep. So the interesting thing is, my pitch to him was, you got a choice. If you take this, you have surety. What do I mean surety?
You know what's happening.
You know in 17 years when your daughter graduates high school, you will be there, you will know what the rest of your life looks like. On the other hand, you can go to trial and you don't know what's going to happen. And let me tell you, you go to trial, you will probably be punished. And
You're at least punished by the process.
Oh, yeah. If you go to trial and lose, it's extremely punitive. Based upon the facts and other things that were said, this gentleman ended up with 50 to 60 years.
Wow, so he was convicted.
He was convicted. Now, my advice to him was, I think it's in your best interest to take the plea. Now, some people will look and say, but if he didn't do it, why would you do that? Reason being is, it's a difference of being not guilty and what you can prove in court.
Well, and you know, you put that evidence in front of 12 random people, and you don't know what they consider reasonable. And that changes jury to jury.
Well, in this particular case, the victim was 16 years old, and the victim, you know, this is what I mentioned to him. I said, listen, that victim's going to wheel up to the microphone because now she's in a wheelchair and can never walk again. And I told him, I said, the jury's going to look at you one last time because they're going to ask her the question, do you see the person in court that shot you? And she's going to turn and say, it was him. They're going to look at you and never look back.
And never look back.
Because at that point, they want someone to pay for this crime.
Well, and I hear about this, so that's a pretty extreme example. I do hear about these things all the time, anecdotally, of people who, you know, again, they use a firearm, but they don't discharge it.
Yes.
And then they end up charged with maybe brandishing or aggravated assault because his story's not my story or whatever. And so, you know, there was one on the channel that a guy shot 2 kids, ended up being teenagers, who stormed into his shop. And his attorney got him to plead that all the way down to improperly pointing a firearm. So
Yes,
he
I remember that.
negotiated
Yep.
with the district attorney all the way down to that. And you go, gosh, man, the difference between a murder charge and this misdemeanor, improperly pointing a firearm, is, you know, 6 months probation, don't lose your firearms rights, and this whole thing goes away, and you don't have
It's
to
a
pay for
winner.
the attorney fees. Sometimes
it's
it's the right thing to do.
It is. And here's the thing. You've got to be able to put yourself in a position of, what are you willing to do?
Right.
What is justice worth to you? Because again, there are plenty of people that are sitting in jail that are not guilty.
Yeah.
They wanted to go
Sad.
down. Yeah, they wanted to go down that route. Now, let me say this, because a lot of people say, is there a cost? There's also a cost to going to trial.
Yep.
You know, there's a cost to getting a plea, and then there's a cost to going to trial. Now, we at Firearms Legal Protection, I want to make sure I put this out. To us, you make that decision. If you say, hey, I want to go to trial, we're going to pay all the way through trial. If you want to get a plea, we're going to pay all the way through. It doesn't matter to us. You are the one who will ultimately make that call. We don't tell the attorney what to do. You are in control, and regardless to whether you have a FLP attorney or any attorney, ultimately you are the one that's in control. It's your case.
They're an advisor and a servant to you.
Absolutely. And the advice that an attorney gives is priceless.
Yeah. So, but there could be a time where a plea is the right answer. And you know, you go, look, I don't want to admit that I did wrong. Well, be that as it may, you have to weigh that against what's best for your family and your situation. I do want to ask, so I know from everything that I've been told, that if I had an insurance product,
Yes.
that you can't insure an illegal act.
Correct, because the moment you admit that you've done something wrong, you're guilty of a crime, it cannot be insured.
But that's not what firearms legal protection is.
Correct.
And so it's a membership. So I can take a plea if it's in my best interest.
And that's the great thing about firearms legal protection. If you find yourself in a position where, hey, it's better for me to take a plea, then we're going to pay all the way through. Some insurance companies, I'm not going to name names, you folks know who they are, but insurance companies, you cannot take a plea, because if you take a plea, that's an illegal act, and therefore you cannot be covered.
And it's not a covered incident. So
Right.
I think that's something to really think through as you think about what's best for you. So, scary stuff. You don't want to get punished with the process, but you better be ready for that kind of consequences and kind of know in advance what you're ready to do. So, Terry, thanks for the knowledge.
Thank you, and again, everybody, please stay safe.